one enemy at the church is destroyed, and then we turn right around and the next enemy comes up. It's like out of the ashes, like the Phoenix, it talks about bad is tromped down and then more bad comes to follow the other bad. And it's ironical how Revelation deals with, okay, how long, Lord, how long? Well, a little more blood, you know, a lot of more people got to die before we say, okay, that's enough. And then when we have these bowls that are poured out, actually the bowls are the blood of the saints, all those that died for the testimony of Christ. The word martyr means witness. And there's so many that, by the millions, were slain by the pagan Romans. So many by the millions were slain by the papal Romans. And so many even today under communism and various isms. We're running into that particular. But we want to get into Revelation 16:17 scripture.
Let's sit here.
I need somebody to read chapter 16 of Revelation, verse 17 through 21. Who'd like to read that?
Then the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were noises and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake. Such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth. Now the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Then every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And great hail from heaven fell upon men, each hailstone about the weight of a talent. Men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, since the plague was exceedingly great.
Okay, how much does a talent weigh?
No clue.
Yeah, how much does it weigh?
I can ask Bertha here.
Okay, answer man. Glenn, how much is a talent? A
What
hailstone?
does it weigh?
6 or 7 pounds?
Yeah.
Really?
I
No, it wasn't the talent, that coin. I thought it was money.
Well, talents sometimes money, but this says it weighed a talent. And talent was,
How much?
well, gold was measured out. They put gold in a balance, and they'd have counterweights, and they weighed out the gold. And yes, what did you find out?
75 pounds.
75 pounds. So if you were driving your car and you get hit by a 75-pound hailstone, either put a bowling ball crater in the roof of your car or take out a windshield. It's like running into a couple cement blocks.
100 pound, 75 pounds,
75 pound
we could take out a car.
Yeah, it would do some damage. It would do some damage. It was kind of funny though, Morgan, it did happen. A jet plane flying overhead released their sewer, the septic tank, and that sewer froze as it fell through the atmosphere. And the guy was a salesman standing there, and he got hit by that glog of frozen septic waste that dropped from the sky. What a way to die. I mean, bad enough to get hit by a hailstone, bad enough to get hit by a sewer stone big as a hailstone. What a way to get taken out. But it's kind of one of those Ripley's, believe it or not, it happened, and he had to be in the wrong place, wrong time, and such happened. It's kind of interesting too, as we talk about God's judgment on nations. I was thinking that one time Japan was going to attack mainland China, and they had an entire Navy fleet, and they ran into a hurricane, and this hurricane wiped out the entire Navy. They had a huge armada and a huge warring nation coming in against them. And we don't even read about that in the scripture, but we do know that God has had judgments. He raises up powers, he lowers powers. And Scripture talks about his judgment on Nineveh, his judgment on Egypt, his judgment on Israel, his judgment on Judah, his judgment on Petra. And he doesn't mention various ones. He talked about his judgment on the Medes and the Persians in the book of Daniel, and the Greeks. And Alexander the Great kind of liked the writings of Josephus because it made him the hero. And he fought with the understanding that he was fulfilling biblical prophecy. And so Alexander liked to hang around the Talmudic Jewish priests there in Israel often and discuss scripture with them, Martha, because he kind of liked what they had to say about the book of Daniel and him becoming world conqueror. And then you got the rise of the Roman Empire, and he talked about how the Rome was iron, and the feet were iron mixed with clay, showing that it was strong as far as in its government organization, was weak as far as its religion. And the stone that was uncut by human hands, it rolled down and hit this image at the feet and destroyed it, and then this stone grew and covered the world. And we covered that in 300 AD when Constantine brought this persecuted church to the main religion of the empire.
325.
And it was 325 era. And the interesting thing too is, we're into Egyptology and the study of the hieroglyphs and all the other, but Christianity is what destroyed the hieroglyphs in the Egyptian temples. All these temples that were teaching hieroglyph in the Egyptian language was all part of the pagan worship. And Constantine making Christianity worldwide, it set Egyptian paganism and destroyed it, closed down all their temples. And so the hieroglyphs that we knew ended up locked up into just obsolete, because people didn't use it anymore and they lost it. Now, what other languages do we have that are lost languages? Latin is supposed to be a language that may be a dead language, and then you got also Greek was supposed to be a dead language, and other languages might have been dead languages. But one of the interesting languages we had that was a language that was almost forgotten was Hebrew. It wasn't until 1947 Hebrew reignited. And once Israel got its statehood, they went back to the Hebrew language. And
that's when they went back to, but they always spoke it.
they had it in
Yiddish.
they had it in their schools, and of course New York Yiddish.
Yiddish is kind of like half German, half Hebrew.
Yeah, Dad taught us a lot of bad words in Yiddish.
Yeah, because there's no bad words in Hebrew.
Well, yeah, so Dad taught us how to say them in Yiddish, and I didn't even know they were bad words until I got later in life and was using these words all along and found out that they were not so good words. Okay, and then you find out, oops. But Revelation chapter 16 talked about these three forces coming out against the church. And they talked about the dragon and the beast and the false prophet. Now, who do we conclude the false prophet may be?
Islam.
Islam. Now, the others will say it's Jehovah's Witnesses, some will say it's Mormons, some will say it's this, that, and the other thing. But we're looking at a religion that's 1 billion strong. And Islam, with Muhammad being the false prophet, probably fits that better than most. Okay. And then we had the other that dealt with the beast. And who was the beast in the book of Daniel? Rome. So if the Bible is going to be a commentary on itself, who would the beast be in the New Testament?
Rome.
Well, it'd be Rome back to Rome, whether it's pagan Rome or papal Rome. It's still Rome in that picture. And then we had the dragon. When we were in college, we interpreted the dragon being communism. At that time, Russia was the bear, but then we went into China. And China is the big seed of, that's 1 billion and a half people, and that they control with their atheistic communism. And they're pictured as the dragon. And also the devil's pictured as the dragon. And so you've got two pictures. But then we have all this, all these spirits, and we're talking about this so-called Battle of Armageddon, called the Valley of Jezreel, the Valley of Armageddon, earlier in that same chapter. And this was a place where all the decisive battles were fought, and all the decisive battles, whoever won that particular battle won the war. And that was what it was. But we go through the 6 vials, the 6 basins poured out as far as God's judgment, and it seems like the 7th vial is poured into the air, and the angel announces, "It is done." And so it'd be neat if Revelation ended right there, but it didn't. It does go on for the rest of the story. But it is done as far as God's judgment against the papal Rome. In today's paper, there's $21 million payoff that certain dioceses had to pay off for priests and their messing around with kids, little boys, and they ended up settling, or supposed to be settling, for $21 million in this one diocese.
They've been going downhill for years now.
It's just been in the latter years. The Catholic Church was the moral compass for American media as far as theater, movies, language.
That's right.
And once the enemy was able to silence the Catholics' moral compass, moral influence on American culture, it just seems like Pandora's box. The devil's out of the bag, everything's gone. Yes, Glenn.
Throughout the history of the Catholic Church, so there were times when they had popes that were kind of God-honoring, but a lot of popes were just as vile as the people they were trying to pretend they were converting.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we pull out the old edition of Haley's Handbook and share with you some of the I guess beyond orderliness, the vileness of some of the popes. It was interesting, I shared, there was a pope in Ravenna, France, and there's another pope in Rome, Italy. And the pope in Rome, Italy, you know what he called the pope there in Ravenna, France?
What?
The Antichrist. You know what the pope in Ravenna, France called the pope in Rome?
The Antichrist.
The Antichrist.
More than one
So there were 3 popes one time. There was a shuffle for power, and somebody didn't want to share the wealth. They moved the capital from Rome to Ravenna because of the battles and the wars and plagues. It's interesting too, when we talk about 1/3 of the earth was struck with plague. The fitting as far as on plague is, they're worried about this Ebola virus can become as bad as the old Black Plague. But we've known cities where half the city was destroyed by disease. And people just stop crying, you just stop weeping, you have so much death around, it just goes beyond. Well, we read in verse 19 that the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and Babylon the Great was remembered before God. Wasn't remembered in a good way, remembered in a bad way. I talked about the cup of the wine of her fierce wrath. If you got a cell phone, you may want to turn off your phone. You know why? I didn't turn mine off, and the last time it rang while I was teaching, remember?
I turned mine off.
Somebody wanted to sell me Arthur Murray dance studio lessons or something.
Yeah, but I turn mine off and then I forget to turn it on, then I miss calls.
But the city was split into 3 parts, and then goes into, then every island fled away, and the mountains were not found, in Revelation 16 verse 20. And then we talked about these huge hailstones. Now, this one translation puts about 100 pounds each. Your translation put it at 75 pounds each. Regardless of whether a talent weighs 75 or 100 pounds, it came down from heaven upon men, and men blasphemed. They knew the judgment was coming from, but they blasphemed God because of the plague and because of the hail, and because the plague was extremely severe. Can you imagine what would happen if you got hit by a 100-pound hailstone? It would probably do a mess to your roof too, wouldn't it?
Hell,
Chapter 17. Next chapter. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." Now this is the apostate. The apostate church sells herself for money and called the great harlot. And it's interesting that the harlot is at odds with the beast. Now, I don't know whether it was papal Rome and pagan Rome colliding with each other right about this time, but you had Rome versus Rome. And the scriptures say, "Come out from her, my people, and be not part of her influence." And some will put the fulfillment of this, the Protestant Reformation, 1530, when Martin Luther brought about the Protestant Reformation, and people are leaving the Catholic Church by the tens of thousands, and priests are leaving by the thousands. And then 400 years goes by, and we have another Protestant Reformation hit South America, Central America, we shared with you earlier, that we had a big exodus by the tens of thousands, people leaving the Catholic Church, and priests leaving the Catholic Church by the thousands. Now, it's happened. In contrast, I shared with some that some of our work among in Mexico. A fellow was down there, he's a missionary, and he started with 7 churches, and then he ended up about 270 churches. And we've lost, probably among our Christian Church of Christ preachers, I think there are about 11 that were murdered by the Roman Catholic Church in Mexico over the last 10 years. So these things are current. Whenever Evers Desbarres, he was a French Acadian priest. Now the Protestants took over Canada and drove the French Acadian Catholics out, and they moved to Louisiana. And so they're in Crowley, Louisiana, and rice fields and working on the oil derricks out in the Gulf. And there's a guy by the name of Evers Desbarres who became a converted priest, and he left Catholicism, and he became a preacher for the Church of Christ. He was kind of a Chuck Dowdy, you know, of 1930s. And he started hundreds of churches and baptized thousands of people, thousands of Catholics. And a tremendous impact. But more than once, he had to duck bullets. You know, there's some bullet go whistling by his ear, because our good friends from the Roman Catholic Church, anybody opposing the Roman Catholic, if you oppose it and preach against it, you might get your head shot. And it just, that goes with the territory. I don't know if we want to say we miss those good old days. Now they might say bad words about you, but normally they don't shoot at you, unless you happen to be in an Islamic country. This is the depiction of the harlot, and we want somebody to read chapter 17 and read all the way through verse 6. 17, 1 through 6. Someone read that.
One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and with the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth.
Read verse 6.
Pardon?
Go ahead and read the next verse.
I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Is that where you want me to stop?
That's a good stopping spot. Okay, let me get back in here. Okay, here's the cup, and inside that cup's blood. And what's the blood? The blood of who?
Abominations of her
Martyrs.
of her adulteries.
Blood of the saints.
Blood of the
The
saints.
blood of the saints in her cup. Now we got 7 hills, 10 horns, and we discussed that before. What city's built upon 7 hills?
Rome.
Rome. So we're back to Rome, and this is a depiction of Rome. And this is the depiction mainly of the Roman Catholic Church and papacy. And this is not a popular topic in this day and age when everything is get along, go along. Don't say anything bad about the Roman Catholic Church, because you got to be politically correct in this day and age, and you don't want to be a homophobe or a Catholicophobe or a Protestantophobe or a phobophobe. You don't want to be any kind of a phobe, because we just got to tolerate. We got to be a very tolerant. It seems like everybody's got to be tolerated, except you can't tolerate Christians and prayer and Bible reading and
Amen.
other things in the culture. Now these things you don't tolerate, but everything else you're supposed to tolerate.
Well, they could consider you intolerant of all of that.
Yeah, but then the person that says you're not supposed to judge is the first one to judge you, and it goes from there. But it's interesting in this depiction, you got the 7 messages of God's judgment, and this woman was sitting on the scarlet beast. She had blasphemous names and the 7 heads and 7 horns, Babylon the Great. Now, the question with Babylon, some of the footnotes put Babylon Rome, and Josephus, I think, will take Babylon and call it Rome. But I was wondering, in biblical prophecy, what if Babylon was literally Babylon? But instead of being figurative Babylon for Rome, and Babylon being Rome, what if this is talking about Babylon between the Islamic powers there, between the Tigris Euphrates in Iran and Iraq? As we're getting closer in history, as we look at prophecy as future and you're scratching your head, maybe we're looking at this thing a little closer than we could 40 years ago and 50 years ago, when we didn't see the Russian Empire imploding. We never thought in our born days we'd see people going to the Red Square and passing out New Testaments. We never thought until we had the Good Twins. They showed a video of the KGB choir singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. That was incredible. You never think to see KGB singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It's phenomenal. You know, in our generation, wow. You ever think the Berlin Wall would come down?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
and yet the Berlin Wall came down through the influence of a good pope and a good president, Ronald Reagan, and the prime minister of Russia. He kind of sat back and let it happen. And it was just, seemed to be the perfect storm. Now these are some other interpretations. There's 4 different interpretations of Revelation. The historicist approach. It says that the historicist, that the prostitutes, the corrupt Roman Catholic Church, including false Protestant churches that have come out of her. Her political and religious influence is carried by the beastly Roman papacy of the Western European culture. Now the preterist, or the pre-milk, is the prostitute is Jerusalem, and her political and false religious influence is carried on by the Roman Empire, the beast. The 7 heads of Rome and the first 7 emperors, Nero the 6th of the emperors is ruling at the time, and the 10 horns of the 10 imperial provinces. Now some of this goes along with historical interpretation, but here they interpret as Jerusalem, and that the false religions is the beast. Now here's a futurist position that the prostitute is a symbol of false religious system. A religious order and the religious conditions will have political influence tied to the power of the beast, the Antichrist. Because the head of the alliance, 10 horns, the 10 nations in Europe in the last days. And this is where they talk about the European Union. And they talk about going to the euro instead of, but the British didn't go to the euro, they stuck with the British pound. And the Swiss didn't go to the euro, they're the banking capital of Europe, and they still go by the Swiss franc. They've not abandoned their currency. Jamaica would be farther ahead if they went back to the British pound. They have more stability in its currency, but when you have your own currency, you can have your own presidents and heroes on your currency. And if you don't produce your own currency, you're going to have somebody else's famous people on the currency. Remember they came up with the idea they want to put a woman on a bill? Don't they have Sandra Chase on a bill? I thought they did.
No, they had the
They tried to.
Anthony Quarter.
No, there were some bills that came out. There's a $500 bill you do not see in circulation anymore, and a $1,000 bill you don't see in circulation anymore. And there's a $10,000 bill and a $100,000 bill you don't see in circulation. It's where banks transfer money from bank to bank. And they had currency. And I think Sandra was on one of those high things. Somebody said instead of booting Lincoln off or Hamilton off on the bill, put a woman on a $30 bill or a $25 bill or a $15 bill. And then you talk about, well, that's as phony as a $3 bill.
There you go.
But then, did you know they had 3-cent pieces and 2-cent pieces in the old days too? Yeah, there were.
What'd you say, I can?
There are 2-cent pieces, 3-cent pieces in American currency, Civil War days, and that was not uncommon. $2 bill tried to be reintroduced, and the interesting thing with the $2 bill, one of our Bible colleges, I think it was either Johnson or Kentucky Christian, says, okay, we're going to pay all our staff salaries in $2 bills this week,
Oh, God.
and we're going to see all these $2 bills circulating throughout the entire city. We'll see how big of an impact our Bible college made on our community. And then the people of the community say, hey, those Christians are cool dudes because they financially generate a lot of funds to underwrite. Now, whenever Carpenter's Home Church was built, a lot of developers licked their lips and says, when this thing goes in, boy, this is going to be expensive property around here. And they looked at it as a big money thing. I mean, as far as the reparations, the ripples, and the waves from that influence. Now the only thing left of that is the cross, and they carried the cross over to Auburndale. They're going to erect that cross over the Church of the Rock over in Auburndale. And that's the only remnant we have of a bygone glory of one of the biggest churches in Central Florida that's now raised and leveled. The idealist position is the prostitute is all false and corrupt religions and has allied itself with political power in order to dominate, and God warns that such religion shall come to an awful end when true faith triumphs. So those are 4 interpretations. Let's read verse 7 through verse 13. 7 to 13. Somebody read that for us, if they may.
I'll read it. Let me see,
7 to 13.
Oh, I'll read it. Okay, 7. 17:7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life, from the creation of the world will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. Oh my. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received the kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them, because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers.
Good stuff there, and do some amplification here. Okay, the 7 messages of judgment. We have the message from an angel, and this is the explanation of the vision. And we had the message from the angel with great authority later on chapter 18, and then later on chapter 18, 4 to 8, you've got call to God's people and God's judgment on Babylon. But the 7 messages of the judgment is dealing with the message from an angel and that authority. Now, God says if a husband divorces his wife and she goes from him and belongs to another man, will he still return to her? Will not that land be completely polluted? But you are a harlot with many lovers, yet you turn to me, declares the Lord. Lift up your eyes to the bare heights and see, where have you not been violated by the roads you sat and for them like an Arab in the desert? And you have polluted the land with your harlotry and your wickedness. This is back in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 3. Same parallel. Come here, I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot. And the great harlot will end in destruction. Now, throughout the Christian age, the great harlot has been deceiving, forcing people to worship according to her desires, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on earth were made drunk with her wine of immorality. And in Revelation, the great harlot Babylon, the great city, all refer to the apostate church. And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And this is one of the pictures where you have the religious power and the governmental power. And those powers combine forces to help each other control the people of the earth. And on her forehead was a name written, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots, and of the abomination of the earth. And of course we have Babylon the Great as the enemy of God's people, Rome, the mother of harlots, gave birth to false religion, and also called an abomination of the earth. This interpretation is any religious practice which is not according to the Bible is spiritual fornication, not just the Roman Catholic. And he says, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. And here we have a picture in the arena back under the days of Nero. And then we've got the bringing out of the Revelation 11 with the Dark Ages with the apostate church and the gloating over the death of the true church. It's a time of despair and confusion. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, is about to come up and out of the abyss and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose name was not been written in the book of the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast, and he was and is not and will come. Now, here's these particular powers: Egyptian, Assyrian, Medo-Persian, Babylonian, Greece, Rome, and then you got the Holy Roman Empire. And these are the governmental powers opposing God. So you got the 7 heads of the beast, and it's the same beast as described in chapter 13. Now, the Bible says here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, which the one sits, 10, and they are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come. When he comes, he must remain a little while. And here we have, as far as the falling of these particular powers, the 7 kings have fallen. 1 is Rome, and 1 has not yet come, the Holy Roman Empire. That's this one particular historical interpretation of.
That's just one point of view, though.
Yeah, it's just one point of view.
Okay.
There's others that have come up with. The one had that the 7 powers were the king was the first, and then the consuls, and then the dictators, and then the tribunes, and then the decemvirs, and then the emperor, and then you had the military governors, and then you had the Catholic military power. And that's the one we used when we were in school studying the book of Revelation. So there are a couple of historical interpretations. But the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received the kingdom. It is interesting, though, when John is writing this, he's in a prison camp there in the Isle of Patmos. He wasn't there by himself, he was in with other prisoners, according to some of the historians, and he was in lockdown. I mean, he was on this labor island. They did some quarrying work and they did some other things, but he was here. And for him to write, come out and attack the pagan Romans by name would have stirred up a little bit more heat than he had anyway, so he wrote in code. And that's what he talked about. He says the 666, mark the beast. You know what I'm talking about. But then we're still scratching our head wondering what he's talking about. But they who he wrote to knew he was talking about. He was talking about the Caesars of that particular time.
Richard,
Yes.
many of these people that draw certain conclusions to what they find in Scripture, if they would look at history itself, they would come to a different conclusion. In fact, I believe that a lot of people that look at this historically look at it the wrong way historically. You've got to narrow it down to where it belongs, and it's easy to do if you just take it, let it speak for itself.
Now, he doesn't come out and name names. He does name names in the book of Daniel, but he doesn't come right out and name names in the book of
That's right,
Revelation.
you don't. But the correlation is there with Daniel.
Oh yeah.
You can't.
That's why normally we study Daniel before we study Revelation. That's why we had Dan do a series on the book of Daniel before we went into Revelation. Because one is a commentary on the other. Now let's read 13 to 18. So we read 13 to 18 for us.
They have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. They shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord. He is the Lord of lords, the King of kings, and King of the lords. The King of kings, and they that are with him are called, and they chosen the faithful. And he said unto me, the waters which you sawest here, the whore sitteth, are peoples, and the multitudes of nations and tongues. And then 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and will make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fires.
And go ahead, 17, 18.
Okay, for God has put in their hearts a fulfill his will, and to agree to give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest in that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
Okay, so you have this war against the Lamb. In other words, there's this spiritual war going on between the church and this particular power that is. And the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues, showing an international influence. And as far as the time of the 10 horns, the woman you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. And then we end up into chapter 18. Now, briefly, I want to go into our red notes here and look at chapter 16, 17, mainly chapter 17 in it.
I see Revelation 15, 16, and 17, 22.
Yeah, 17 to 22 section.
Take it out, family.
Okay, it talks about the symbol in chapter 17 about the whore clothed in purple. It says the angel told John in chapter 17 verse 18 that the woman's the great city that rules the world. That city was Rome. It says that the waters represent the many people she would rule over. That means that she'd be universal or Catholic. The two keys point to the conclusion that the whore represents Roman Catholicism. The Roman Catholic Church had made agreements with worldly powers. She was guilty of many sins, the lives of many of the popes, and it says she was guilty of many who tried to obey the Lord to be true to the Word. The Catholic Church killed them. Her title fits the nature and mystery. She had many secret ways and schemes. Babylon, the captor of the true church, mother, from her have come many doctrines and groups. Next section, the significance of the scarlet-covered beast was the heads were representing 7 mountains and the 7 kings, types of governments, of which John's time 5 had fallen. 1 was and 1 more would come. The 10 horns represented 10 kings or kingdoms. This is obviously a Roman power. Rome was situated in 7 hills. Rome had 7 types of government, kings through governors. And after Rome fell in 476 AD, which we discussed some weeks ago, the empire was divided 10 ways among the Vandals, Visigoths, Suevi, the Alans, the Burgundians, Franks, Brits, Huns, Lombards, and Ravennas. The scarlet denotes rulership and wealth. One of the Catholic supporters, France, began a rebellion which began to decay the Catholic power. The Catholic force will continue to fight the truth until Jesus comes, defeats, or punishes them. The next section, Babylon, chapter 18, says this chapter borrows from the Old Testament and carries on from there. Now I want to go into a little bit of background. Some have these notes, some don't, but this is some of the stories of the early Protestant Reformed writers. And I want to share this. This is on John Fox. Morty asked me some months back, he says, can you give me a copy of Fox's Book of Martyrs? And I found an extra copy for him. We gave it to him. John Fox lived from 1516 to 1587, and his Fox's Book of Martyrs is also a book of prophecy that he wrote. John Fox, famous author of Fox's Book of Martyrs, was born in Lincolnshire, and from childhood was usually studious and devout. He was converted to Protestantism at Oxford. Let me back up here and get something more. Here we go. In Oxford, he was made a fellow in 1543. So let's see, 1516, 26, 36, 26. He's about 25, 26 years old. He became a professor there at the college. He was driven from England to Germany during the reign of Bloody Mary. I wonder why they called this Catholic lady by the name of Mary Bloody Mary. Because she liked the cocktail, Bloody Mary made with tomato juice. And
She was against the Protestants and killed them.
she was blood up to her elbows with Protestant blood. While in exile, Fox wrote his famous book on martyrs, which he began at the suggestion of Lady Jane Grey, who was herself a martyr. When Elizabeth ascended the throne, he returned to England and published the book in 1563. Now 1563, this is 560 years ago. He was immensely popular since the terrors of Mary's reign were still fresh on men's minds. In 1684, it had gone through 9 editions. And I don't know how many editions it had, but I mean, we've had editions all the way up through. That book's been in print. I got a copy when I was in college, and that's been 50 years ago. The martyrs portrayed in this book were frequently prophecy expositors and often died refusing to recant their prophetic faith. Therefore, it's not surprising that Fox wrote an exposition of Bible prophecy himself. His son published the 400-page work in 1587 after his father's death. From mentions that his book had many outstanding points, among them was Fox's identification of the angel of Revelation 10 as symbolizing the restoration of gospel preaching during the Reformation. He also wrote that it was clear in light itself that the 6th trumpet signified the Turks. Fox's well-known Book of Martyrs is considered to have had the great influence on the Protestant thinking of that era. Next to the Bible, less well known is the influence his book of prophecy had on the next generation of expositors like Thomas Brightman and Joseph Mead. Now we got Joseph Mead, our next guy. This is the Revolution in Prophecy Exposition. Joseph Mead was a professor of Greek at Cambridge. His accomplishments in philosophy, history, mathematics, and physics were conspicuous. Declining prominent university positions, he chose instead to teach prophecy. That was his specific special study. His fame rests largely in his Clavis Apocalypticae of 1627, which sets forth the structure outlining the Apocalypse of Revelation. He believed that this was a prerequisite for sound interpretation. He ordered the visions of the Apocalypse, like the 7 churches, seals, and trumpets, based on internal evidence before attempting to interpret them. He first proved that the 3.5 times, 42 months, and 1260 days were all one 1260-year period that began with the rise of the papacy. Now, I share this. When I share with you that interpretation of all these 3.5 weeks, 42 months, 1260 days, represented day years in prophecy, time times half a time. And what I'm sharing with you says, well, you know, that's just Richard's opinion. No, commentators on Revelation, 1500s, 1600s, took that same interpretation. So it's, it's nothing new. We're sharing with you 500 years of historical interpretation, and it's, I'm going to say it's old school. This is classic. Remember when Coca-Cola came out with New Coke and people hated it? They said, we want the old Coke. Well, this is the old Coke. It's not the new Coke.
To a small degree, some of this is being revived.
Well, yeah. Mead also revived the belief in a future 1,000-year millennium and taught that it would begin with the destruction of the Antichrist and a literal resurrection. As a result, premillennialism became popular again in the 17th century. And so premillennialism was a forgotten issue. I mean, some of the early church fathers were premillennialists. And I'm going to say, Joseph, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore your kingdom? The Israel, those early followers right there when Jesus was ready to ascend into heaven, they were already questioning, Lord, are you going to found your kingdom right now? And some will say that, the last apostle will not face death until Jesus' kingdom come with power. And they didn't understand the interpretation. They're looking for a physical kingdom, and Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this earth. If so, my men would fight with sword. I'd call down 10,000 angels. But my kingdom is not of this world. It's a spiritual kingdom called the what? What is Christ's kingdom, church?
Church.
The church. Morning.
Yeah, this premillennialism before 1824 is a little bit different in their outlook as opposed to this outlook that came out of 1824.
Well, then you got the others that came with the turn of the century, the early 1900s.
Right.
The early 1900s was a whole new. Schofield came up with a lot of the Schofield Bible and other movements among the Adventists. They popularized a lot of the Jehovah's Witnesses, popularized a lot of the prophecy. The Adventists have huge prophecy lectureships, and they'll have big rallies and people come to them. And Mark of the Beast, according to the Adventists, of course, is Sunday worship. If you go to church on Sunday, then you're carrying the brand of the papal harlot on your brow. And so by going to church on Sunday, and they said the Saturday is the day, and if you don't keep Saturday, then you got the mark of the beast on you. But that's their interpretation. Interesting. But he goes on to say that in 1642, 4 years after his death, the Clavis Apocalypti was authorized for publication by the British Parliament as England descended into a civil war. His work on prophecy had a proud influence on a remarkable Cambridge scholar student. His name was Isaac Newton. The next one we have Thomas Brightman, and we'll just close out with Thomas's comments. Thomas Brightman was called the English prophet. He was born in Nottingham, shades of Robin Hood. Nottingham, England, and was educated at Cambridge. He became a church rector. I don't know what a rector was. I don't know if that's a deacon or a building attendant. He spent his life in diligent pastoral work and constant study. He always carried around a Greek New Testament, which he read through every 2 weeks, even reading it while writing.
I'll take her.
Fast reader. Known by his admirers as the English prophet, Brightman was full of grace and of an angelic temperament, but he had no patience with the Church of England, which he considered Laodicea. Laodicea, of course, was the lukewarm church. His dissatisfaction led him to help found the Presbyterian Church in England. So here's another revolution. In 1600, he wrote a very popular commentary on the Apocalypse Revelation in response to Cardinal Bellarmine's introduction to the futurist theory. Later, when the Jesuit Ribera published his futurist exposition, Brightman took him to task as well. Do the papists take heart again? So is that book, which of a long time before they would scarce suffer any man to touch, they dare now take it in hand to entreat fully upon it? E.B. Elliott said his commentary is one of great vigor in both thought and language, and deservedly one of the most popular in the Protestant churches of that time. Now, I want to say this to say this, Rivera. The Protestants were pulling Catholics out by the tens of thousands. And the Catholic Church says, we stand it so much we can stand it no more, we're going to stop this. So they got this Jesuit priest by the name of Ribera. And they said, Ribera, we want you to begin a counter-reformation. We got to do something and say something and do something proactively to stop these people who are hemorrhaging as a church. We got to save the Roman Catholic Papa, Mother Church. So instead of the Pope being the Antichrist, which Luther preached, and other reformers preached even before Luther. Luther was one that preached it probably the loudest. But the Protestant reformers, I had a listing of about 270 Protestant reformers from about 1285 to about 1799 or 1830, whatever, all said the Pope was the Antichrist. I mean, for about 500 years, from about 1200 to 1800, 700 years. But Ribera says, okay, the Pope is not the Antichrist. The Pope is going to be a Jew, Martha,
Yep,
that's going to come in the future, and he's going to come out of Europe,
yeah.
and he's going to lead the European nations astray, and he's somebody in the future. And let's get this Antichrist business off our Papa Pope, and let's get it on to somebody coming up later on. The irony of it all is, now don't forget this is a papal reformation against the bleeding, the hemorrhaging of the church to the Protestant faith. In the later 1800s, early 1900s, Protestant evangelists by the name of Moody and Schofield about various ones, even Billy Graham, they are preaching that the Antichrist is a future Jew coming in the leadership. And Billy Graham even took Healy's handbook. In 1965, his organization, not he personally, but his organization took Healy's handbook. Instead of approaching it historically, all Healy's handbook prior to 1965 dealt with the historical approach to all revelation. They changed it from historical to premillennial. And they changed it to go from the Antichrist being the Pope to the Antichrist being a Jew in the future. And they not only did that, but they deleted 30 pages where it talked about all the sodomy and all the fornications and all the ribaldry of the Roman Catholic priests and the Roman Catholic popes. I mean, it says that the papacy, Vatican, stunk to high heaven with his ungodliness. It was more than a good old boy men's club. I mean, it was just
I guess it was.
raunch. Sewer city. I mean, the bottom dregs of the armpit of civilization was Rome.
Oh, you're being kind to it.
Well, I mean, kind. But still in all, we've got to share with you what has happened. And a lot of this information, people say, well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings because. And, but I'm sorry, feelings got to be hurt. History is history. Do we change it? No. Do we learn from it? Well, if we don't learn from it, we're going to repeat it. But, that's where we're being. But enough for this. Next Wednesday, I'm going to be down in Jamaica with my sweetheart. We'll be coming back home Saturday.